Good day, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending upon your time zone. My name is Chris Gregory. I'm with CIMdata, and today we're addressing IP security in the era of Industry 4.0. Is your IP safeguarded in an era where we have global collaboration? Joining me on today's webinar will be representatives from Siemens PLM Software and from NextLabs. I'll be talking to you about the problems we face with IP security, and then representatives from NextLabs and Siemens PLM Software will be talking to you and demonstrating the solution to this ever-pressing problem. Word about CIMdata. We have been around since 1983, and our focus is as the world's largest strategic management consultant firm focused exclusively on the PLM marketplace. We bridge the gap between industrial users and PLM providers, providing independent advice to our clients and dedicated to maximizing their value of PLM through innovation and innovative solutions for the PLM marketplace. We don't sell PLM software or implement it. Instead, we're an agnostic and independent arbitrator to give you the best value in this area. Now, a couple things about logistics. You'll see a question panel on the right-hand side. Use this to enter questions throughout. We'll be pausing and saving time at the end to be able to answer questions as they appear. If we don't have time at the end, we will send email updates to everyone. And the most important thing is the interaction. Addressing your business needs and making sure that we address them in a timely way and being able to get this information to you. The webinar itself will be recorded, and that will be available to attendees and registrants about 2 days after the webinar has been completed, and everybody will receive a link via email. We want to address the market trends that are underway. PLM is an enabling technology, but the reason it's being used is because we're facing ever increasingly complex products. We're seeing that in each of the major disciplines of electronics and assemblies, for materials and connectivity between the different work streams, as well as with sustainability, which is an increasing theme in all of the work that we're doing. We're seeing this in increasingly complex ecosystems, from your organization, whether it be R&D, distributed manufacturing, and IT support, environmental concerns, as well as societal concerns. We're seeing drastic reductions in time to market. In the automotive industry, for example, in the 70s and 80s, it took 7 years to design and build the first automobile. It's now decreased from 5 to 3 years, and now we're approaching 18 months. The need for upfront prediction capabilities and more flexibility and choices in the products we build. We're seeing individual customization as well as regional and cultural customizations that are put in place in the products we design and use. We're seeing real-time and virtual access to the information throughout the product design chain, and obviously reductions in overhead costs, trying to get that as close to zero as feasible and practical today, and ever-improving product quality and robustness, so that the model for our products is changing from a product itself to a product as a service. For example, GE aircraft engines no longer sells engines to airframe manufacturers, but instead guarantees power by the hour and uptime. And that's only enabled by order of magnitude increases in the quality of the products they deliver. And we're seeing customized and cognitive engineering appear more and more into the products we build, with predictive behavior being built in and the Internet of Things. Building for sustainability, social media with our clients. This is bringing into play Industry 4.0, which is really the next wave of innovation. The key enabler here is digitalization and the technologies that are deployed we read about in the news: autonomous robotics, simulation, cybersecurity, cloud, additive manufacturing, augmented reality, and virtual reality. And at the hub of this is PLM, Product Lifecycle Management. It controls and organizes and distributes the information where needed, in the form needed, to the individuals as needed. Implicit in this is the connectivity at each point along the way. As the information flows from requirements to planning to manufacturing, quality and test, to sales and distribution, to maintenance, repair, and finally to disposal, the information makes a full loop. And at each point along the way, IP and compliance violations may be at risk across the media, the process, the time, and the extended enterprise. Slicing this in a different way, using the digital thread. A digital thread takes a bill of material or bill of information across the life cycle of design, concept, build, and then ultimately service. You'll see the digital thread as it maps the information components from one stage to the next. You'll also see at each step along the way the potential for IP security, making certain that the right individual and the right organization has the right information, as well as unintended access at each point is a vulnerability between the systems. And when we go downstream to the simulation systems, ERP and manufacturing systems, and service lifecycle, we transcend yet another system with IP at risk at each point along the way. Now, what does this mean? We've read about recent breaches in the news from Equifax and the breaches of our information on a secure from our personal finances. But finances is really just a small fraction of the cyber incidents reported. In 2015, the last year available, manufacturing cyber incidents far eclipsed all other sources. And again, this is just the tip of the iceberg. It's estimated this is only 1 to 10% of the total risks that actually took place. Now let's look at another slice of this, the security breaches that we hear about. The scale of the theft is literally unprecedented, hundreds of billions of dollars per year in magnitude and impact. To put this in perspective, this is about the same size as the R&D budget of the Global 1000. The total R&D budget, and the risk of the problem is the IP security breaches. It results in millions of jobs lost, it's a drag on growth, and it diminishes the ultimate innovation. Another impact is counterfeit goods, costing the U.S. economy about $600 billion a year. And beyond the direct cost is counterfeits are destroying and jeopardizing the quality of the supply chain for assembled products in industrial machinery as well as the aerospace and defense world. And just as the problem exists now, it's getting even worse. As the collaboration increases, as you saw with underlying trends, the theft is increasing at an ever faster rate. So in summary, Industry 4.0 is a new paradigm, and it's driving new innovation. The number of connections, data set sizes, and outside organizations is increasing at an ever faster rate. It's enabling the digital thread and enabled by PLM, connecting the emerging technologies for tomorrow's products. The possibility of IP, intellectual property, or compliance violations being compromised ever increases, and as well as the cost itself. Only one security impact can threaten the viability of your organization's future. The good news to all of this, however, is that NextLabs and Siemens have partnered together with an offering called EDRM for Teamcenter, a joint solution to address this problem. And I'll turn this over to our other presenters to discuss this in more detail.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Okay, digitalization changes all areas of life and also existing business models. Now, this increases pressure on not only industries, but also opens up new business opportunities at the same time. Industrial enterprises need to reduce time to market significantly, massively improve their flexibility, and increase quality whilst reducing energy and resource consumption. Another general requirement is security, and digitalization also leads to increasing vulnerabilities through increased and wider sharing of digital data. And this increases the need for appropriate security measures, including EDRM. In addressing the challenges that manufacturing companies face, Siemens has introduced the Digital Enterprise Suite, enabling manufacturing companies to streamline their entire businesses, seamlessly integrating suppliers into the mix, from design through service. Digital enterprises create a digital image of their entire value chains, and this results in an intelligent data model, or digital twin, which enables ideation and optimization in the virtual world. This information is managed in one data model within Teamcenter as the collaboration platform, which enables for simulation, test, validation, and optimization of both the product and the production process in a complete digital environment. For anyone who doesn't know what Enterprise Digital Rights Management, or EDRM, is, I'd like to take a moment just for a level set. EDRM can simply be thought of as the software tool that provides persistent and automatic control of access to and the usage of digital information regardless of where it exists, be it inside or outside your systems or firewall. With the Teamcenter PLM platform, we automatically and persistently protect data both within and outside of Teamcenter, no matter whether files are downloaded, shared, or emailed, for example. The use of EDRM within the extended enterprise typically involves data being shared across use cases that fall into two distinct categories, namely those covering partners and those covering employees. Partner use cases typically cover supply chain, collaboration, as well as joint ventures, and working with engineering partners on product collaborations. Consider that in many instances, partners are also competitors. The employee use cases include field operations with sales and services organizations within companies needing to access data from anywhere at any time, and global engineering collaboration, where multiple divisions or departments within a company work on products collaboratively. I'm going to now take a few moments just to look at these four use cases in more detail. Global PLM systems such as Teamcenter enable streamlined collaboration and global processes across divisions and geographies, but it can be challenging to control data for need-to-know projects, new product introduction, and global regulatory export requirements. Companies must achieve a delicate balance between sharing and securing their data. The types of information risks in this use case include IP loss through suppliers and their partners, and disruption caused by suppliers not using the latest up-to-date specifications. But there are several challenges that EDRM can help to address, and namely providing visibility and control over product data after it is shared with your suppliers, ensuring that suppliers can no longer access outdated product data, the need to manage the resharing of your data throughout a supplier's sub-supply chain in an efficient and traceable way. Field service and sales representatives need access to technical product manuals and service instructions on laptops and mobile devices. Aftermarket service and sales has become a critical business for many manufacturing companies. The types of information risks in this use case include lost or stolen devices, which can lead to a loss of company IP and customer confidential data. And the risk of IP theft by insiders and competitors is a direct threat to a company's service revenue. There are also several challenges that EDRM helps to address in this particular use case. Enabling large amounts of technical manuals, for example, and service instructions that need to be available to a remote and mobile workforce securely. And protecting data in multiple formats, be it drawings, 3D, Adobe, Office, even service databases. Product data needs to be shared with suppliers so that they may design, manufacture, and test components. Suppliers often additionally need to modify your information to fit into their processes and reshare your information with their partners and suppliers. Loss or theft of IP is common, whilst timely and accurate access to the correct product data is critical to control costs and project timelines. The types of information risks in this use case include the loss of theft of IP through suppliers and their partners, and disruption caused by suppliers and partners and their suppliers using old or outdated specifications. There are also several challenges which EDRM can help to address. Providing visibility and control over product data after it is shared with suppliers, as well as subsequently reshared by your supplier with their supply chain. And extending change management processes into the extended enterprise for access to accurate and timely data, as well as the need to manage the resharing of data throughout a sub-supply chain in an efficient and traceable way. Partner product collaboration is a use case which covers multiple companies collaborating on product development within partnerships or joint ventures. Both companies must share and jointly develop IP whilst protecting the IP of their engineering partners. Protection of IP is a contractual obligation for all parties, but companies typically lack adequate controls to enforce these. The types of information risks in this use case include a breach of IP licenses or contracts due to the mishandling of partner IP and the loss or theft of IP through their partners. There are also several challenges again that EDRM can help to address. So ensuring clear and consistent designation of IP ownership, classifications, and controls to enforce IP handling requirements. Enabling the secure sharing and modification of engineering and manufacturing data. And the ability to extend consistent access controls from source across all partners, where companies often have no knowledge of which specific engineers will need to access their data on the partner side. So without EDRM, there is no control over what happens to IP after it leaves your network and is shared in the extended enterprise. Even though employees are authorized to have access to data in your systems, there is the very real risk of the misuse or theft of that IP. With EDRM, you now control who can access your IP and how it is consumed throughout the digital thread. Protections are extended outside of the Teamcenter environment to help prevent the theft and misuse of your IP. The EDRM for Teamcenter solution is an end-to-end solution that provides automated EDRM protection, eliminating manual intensive procedures, whilst still providing ad hoc user or workflow-driven based protections. Provides persistent protection for IP in files including CAD, source code, drawings, 3D models, PDF, Office, and almost any digital file type, all whilst using native engineering applications even when offline. Also extends Teamcenter protections, encapsulating Teamcenter access controls, object and security metadata, including IP classifications, with your IP-sensitive digital files outside of the managed environment with an attribute-based access control paradigm. And finally, it provides for the secure collaboration throughout the extended enterprise, both inside and outside of Teamcenter. To summarize, EDRM for Teamcenter protects IP from design through manufacturing and service in Industry 4.0. Design process risks that can be addressed by EDRM, including accidental data leakage, insider threats, secure sharing with partners, controlling and preventing unauthorized use, and avoiding breaches of licenses. Manufacturing process risks that can be addressed by EDRM can be summarized as including a lack of manufacturing controls, the secure sharing with suppliers, unauthorized sharing and resharing by suppliers and partners, the lack of visibility or control of data once it leaves your managed environment, and data leakage. So I will now hand over to Bill Armstrong from the NextLabs team, who's going to demonstrate a number of the use cases that we've discussed with the EDRM for Teamcenter solution.
Thank you, Guy. Before we get into the demonstration, we will review some of the key features of the solution and then go through the use case that we'll be demonstrating. Some of the key features of the solution, policy-based dynamic authorization. So we can extend the security from Teamcenter to your IP that's being shared outside of your organization. So policies can be written to control what data users have access to that's been protected by EDRM for Teamcenter. So controlling what users data is shared with, so which suppliers through multiple tiers, what rights they have to those files, and as Guy mentioned, being able to do things like control the amount of time that a user might be able to open up a file. We support secure access to files across devices, which includes support for web-based zero-client access. So across Windows, desktops and workstations, across mobile devices, any device that has an HTML5 browser will be able to consume a protected file. We have a secure overlay. This means that similar to a watermark, we can display information about who's accessing the protected file, date, time, any other information that you want to show. This can help prevent users from doing things like taking a picture of a protected file. We can protect any file type. So as Guy mentioned, being able to protect engineering drawings, Office, PDF, any file type, solutions file type agnostic. We have active workspace integration for Teamcenter. We support sharing across suppliers. So in the use case that we go over, the use case is going to be a supplier sharing use case, and we'll also talk about how we can support suppliers resharing files across multiple tiers of suppliers. We also support auditing and reporting. So when your IP has been shared outside of Teamcenter, we can also audit who is accessing that protected data and information about where they're accessing that data from. So if we wanted to run reports on who is accessing certain files, certain protected files, certain IP, who's accessing specific data classifications. We can run audit reports for a specific time period. So if we wanted to know what a certain user in our organization or at a supplier was accessing, we can run those types of reports. So if a compliance team has requirements where you need to report on what is happening with your IP after it's being shared, or you need to know what a supplier is doing with your IP, those reports can embed auditing and reporting and help with that. So Guy went over 4 different use cases that we typically see with the EDRM for Teamcenter solution. In our case, we're going to go over the partner supply chain use case. So we'll demonstrate how EDRM for Teamcenter can help with protecting the data in Teamcenter and what happens to it as it's shared and consumed outside of Teamcenter. And we will also speak about the resharing of the data across suppliers, multiple tiers of suppliers. In our use case, we have 3 separate users, John, Alan, and An. So John is an internal Acme employee, so he's going to be the Teamcenter user who creates the data, manages that data, protects it, and then shares it. And he's going to have full control over all data classifications. Alan is going to be our first tier supplier. So he's working for a company in Bolts from the UK, and he's going to have different levels of access to different classifications based on the EDRM for Teamcenter policies. So we're extending the Teamcenter security to the protected data as it's shared outside of Teamcenter. So Alan will only have the rights that we specify in our policies, and so the Acme policies are that first tier supplier only gets read-only access to confidential data. And then An is another supplier who's, in this case, considered an unknown company. This isn't a company that we're sharing this specific data with. So they're going to have no access to this protected data. So we're ensuring that as this data is shared with our suppliers and leaves our control, leaves our network, leaves Teamcenter, we control who outside of our company or even internally can access that data and what level of access they have. So in this case, An will be denied access. And like we mentioned previously, we also support sharing across multiple tiers of suppliers. So Bolts and the company that An works for might have a relationship, and we could support a scenario where Alan or Bolts needs to reshare with another tier of supplier. At the bottom of the screen here, we can see the 2 different policies that we wrote to be able to create this use case. So for the managing of or the handling of confidential files, we're going to allow internal users read and write access to confidential files. EDRM for Teamcenter policies are natural language policies, so very easy for a power user or someone in compliance or legal or the engineer in this case to write those policies to facilitate these use cases. The second policy allowing partners read access to confidential files. So 2 very simple policies to help facilitate this specific use case. Our demonstration is going to be in RAC. This is a screenshot of what the active workspace integration looks like. So just so you know that we can support both interfaces, both scenarios. So we can see here that this is the button that's used to actually protect data through Active Workspace. And then we have a couple of files that have actually been already protected using EDRM for Teamcenter. And you'll see in the demonstration within RAC what this looks like, what the process is. So we'll go into the demonstration now. So within Teamcenter, we're going to go through the typical steps that a Teamcenter user will go through to upload data, classify that data, and protect the data using EDRM for Teamcenter. So we have a file here on the desktop, a JT file, and what we're going to do is we're going to drag and drop it into Teamcenter. So we have our speedboat that we just created, and now we're going to go ahead and edit its properties. So one important note is we're going to use the classification information within Teamcenter to determine determine what policies apply to this data as it's shared. So we can use any number of attributes from within Teamcenter, and it's important to note that we don't have to take any additional steps to determine who can consume this data or what rights the users have to this data. We use this classification information to automatically apply policies to the data and to determine who can access it. So there's no extra step of determining who has rights to this data. The person in charge of the info doesn't have to make decisions about who they can share this data from a compliance standpoint or a contractual standpoint. That's all handled via policy. In our demonstration, we're going to use the IP classification field. So I'm going to go down to the IP classification. And we're going to select a classification level. So in our slide where we talked about the different use cases, we mentioned that confidential data has specific security applied to it. So this confidential file will only be able to be read by a specific supplier and not other users outside of our organization. So I'm going to save and check in the file. And then we're going to go to protect the data. So as Guy mentioned, we can automate the protection of the data. We can integrate it with Teamcenter workflows. In this case, we're going to do a user-driven protection. So I'm going to right-click on the file, click NextLabs, and click Protect. And now the file is being protected in the background. So a few things are happening here. So we're communicating with our rights management to be able to perform the encryption itself. And we're taking any of the classification information from this data and applying it to the protected file. So now what we're going to have is a protected version of the file, an encrypted version of the file stored in Teamcenter, and this will be ready for sharing. So now, we have our Teamcenter security that manages access to the data within Teamcenter, but if an authorized user now downloads this file, they're going to get the protected version. And now that we have this protected version of the file, our EDRM for Teamcenter policies will now control who can access this data outside of Teamcenter. So it doesn't matter if I download this file and share it with other organizations, if I put it on a USB stick, if I upload it to cloud storage, the data remains protected. Also, the classification information that we set in Teamcenter will also follow this file throughout its life cycle. So we know that in this case, this is an ACME confidential file, and it will be handled as such throughout its life cycle. So I refreshed the interface in Teamcenter, and there's an overlay icon that shows that this file is now protected. So I'm going to right-click, go to Name References. We'll see that we have our protected version of the file. So I can go ahead and download it. I'm going to click Download, and I'm going to save this in a file share. So I mentioned previously that it doesn't matter how this data is shared. So in the demonstration, we're going to just put this data in a file share that our suppliers can access. And again, this could be cloud storage, any way that you would typically share data with suppliers, whether it's email or a portal, Dropbox. We ensure that the data remains protected. So I'm going to download the file here, close. Now we're going to go to the client and see what this file looks like, how this file is handled. So I'm going to go into the file share. Now we have a few different files that were protected with different classifications. So we can see how just the classification of the data within Teamcenter when the file is protected determines who can access that data as it's shared with suppliers in this use case. So I have my general file here. I'm going to right-click on it, go to NextLabs, and check my permissions. And we're logged in as John now, who's the data. This is the internal user who was able to access this data within Teamcenter. We can see what rights he has via the EDRM for Teamcenter policies. So he has full control of this data. And if we go to the classification tab, we can see that the IP classification that we set within Teamcenter follows this file. So it's set to general. So when we try to access this file, we say, who is the user? What are their user attributes? What supplier do they work for in this case? or is it an internal user? So we can check all of that information against our policies. And then we also check to see what the classification of the data is. In this case, it's general. So we know that John has access to general data and he has full control. So that's what he's granted. To consume the protected file, there's no step to go through to decrypt the file. It's all seamless to the end user. So in this case, I can just double click the file. And in this case, it's a JT file that's opening up in JT to go. So in the background, we check to see if the user had access to the file and open it up in the application that's associated with this file type. We know that John has full control of confidential files also. So if we go in and check his permissions, we can see he has full control to the confidential data. So now we're going to log in as the first tier supplier, so Alan Ian in this case, to see what level of access he has to this data. So I'm now logged in as Alan, and I'm going to go to the same file share. We see the same 3 files. And I go to the general file and check his permissions. And based on the slide that we looked at, our policy still allows the first tier supplier users at Bolts full control of general files. And then when we go to the confidential file and check his permissions, we can see that now his permissions have been changed. So when we protected the data in Teamcenter, we didn't have to specify who had rights to it, what permissions they were going to have. All of that is managed automatically through our policies. And this policy has determined that Alan only has view rights as that first tier supplier to the confidential data. So the EDRM for Teamcenter is extending our security in Teamcenter to this data that's now in a file share outside of Teamcenter. So we're controlling who can access this data and what rights they have. So I'll now go to that unknown user on who is not supposed to have access to this data. We'll look at the same file. So I'm logged in as on now. We'll go to the file share. Same files. Go to NextLabs General, check my permissions. We can see that the user has no access to this file. So on in this case is an unknown user. This is not data that's been shared with them, and they're automatically denied access. So no rights are given. Again, we didn't have to account for this when we were protecting the data and sharing it. So in this case, it doesn't matter how our IP is or our protected files are sent out or distributed or shared. Only users who are given access via our policies will be able to open up those files and given appropriate rights based on those policies. So if On receives this file inadvertently or has access to this file share in this case, and they're not supposed to be able to access it, they're denied access. And so again, all of this happens automatically in the background. So what we went over here is that supplier use case, and again, we can handle all those different use cases that Guy went over in this slide. We also have, I had mentioned previously that there's multiple ways to consume a protected file. So this is through our rich client. We also have a web-based viewer, a zero client option. So I go to NextLabs, the rights management interface. So again, this is browser-based. I can log in as a user here. So I'm going to log in as John again. And what we see here is the ability to consume a protected file through a web interface. And we also have a mobile app to be able to do this. So we can connect repositories to the rights management interface. So in this case, we have a couple of Dropbox repositories. So if you have different ways that you collaborate with suppliers and share data, you can do that. You can connect those repositories through the NextLabs interface, or the user can upload a file that was shared with them. So if they don't have a client, they can come to the zero client interface, the web viewer, and upload a file. So I'm going to go into our Dropbox repository and look at that speedboat file that we had uploaded and open it. And now what happens is when we try to open up this file, even though we're using the web interface, it's still checking those EDRM for Teamcenter policies to determine what rights that user has to the file. So in this case, we determined that we knew John has full control of this file, so it opens up automatically, seamless to the end user. And now we have the file open up in the browser. And in this case, we're looking at that same JT file. You can see the secure overlay here, so we can see that John opened up the file, the date and time that he opened it. And this message can be, or this information can be customized. So if you wanted to say property of company name, classification of the data, all of that can be shown in the interface. And I can see, the different parts. I can rotate the image. I can check its classification. So again, the classification information that came from Teamcenter, measurements. And in this case, we can also, so we're showing a JT file here, but any file type like Office and PDF can also be opened up in this zero client web interface. So that's the demonstration of the supplier use case. We'll go back to the slides to review. So these are the items that Guy had reviewed through the prior to the demonstration. So just to review and tie this back to the demonstration. So we're doing so what we demonstrated was the automated protection of data of your IP in Teamcenter. So ensuring that that data is protected from end to end, starting in Teamcenter. So we logged into Teamcenter, uploaded a file, classified it, and protected it. We demonstrated the persistent control over who can access that data outside of Teamcenter, so extending that security to shared protected data outside of Teamcenter. So that's persistent. So we controlled, so data was downloaded, stored in a file share, or uploaded to Dropbox, and the data remained protected throughout its life cycle. So that way we ensure that only authorized users are accessing our IP even as it leaves our network. We're extending our Teamcenter security and access control to data that's been shared outside of Teamcenter. So again, through those EDRM for Teamcenter policies, we control who can access that data, even if they're outside of our company. So in this case, we looked at that supplier use case and the suppliers consuming that protected data, ensuring that we have secure collaboration throughout the extended enterprise. So across our suppliers, our supply chain, internally across employees, ensuring that only authorized users have access to our IP, ensuring that we're controlling it throughout its life cycle. Now we're going to go to the question and answer portion of the webinar.
Great. Hi, everyone, and thanks, Bill, and to our speakers. We'll get the Q&A started just to kick things off. As a reminder, you can ask questions on the right-hand side of your screen in the Q&A chat box. So let's get to it. So we have the first question coming in here. Can I apply multiple security policies at the same time? Let's start with the NextLabs folks.
Yes, you can. So you can create a set of policies to manage all of the, so in this case, for the demo, all the suppliers that you might be working with and all the different classifications that you might use. So you can use multiple combinations of classifications that are coming from Teamcenter. So in this case, we use the IP classification. So you set up the different policies that you would use to handle all those classifications that you use. And then at runtime, so dynamically, when a user tries to access the protected data, we check against all the different policies that are already deployed. So typically, you'll only have maybe a handful of policies for your main classifications. But when a user tries to access that data at runtime, we'll check against all those policies. And if multiple policies apply, and one of those policies denies the user access, then they'll be denied. But yes, the answer is you can use multiple policies seamlessly.
Great, thank you. Next question, I believe, was for Chris. In your presentation, you mentioned counterfeit goods. Can you expand on that and define what you mean by counterfeit goods?
Sure. Counterfeit goods are where the original product or component is substituted with one that is either unauthorized or of inferior quality. A good example would be in the aerospace and defense world, where you have radiation-hardened IC chips. And there was an example that we actually ran across a year ago where it was substituted by a offshore manufacturer and produced and used a commercial chip that was not radiation hardened, and that compromised the integrity of the entire satellite assembly.
Great, thank you. All right, our next question, is there some EDRM agent running on the machine just checking for permissions? I think that's for Bill.
Sure. So we went over two different scenarios. So there's the rich client version. So that's what we use at the desktop level to open up files in Windows. So that client runs in the background and checks against those policies at runtime when the user tries to access one of those protected files. In cases where there's no client, that's when we would use the zero client option. So that's the web-based version that I went over at the end of the demo. So that's clientless. User just connects to the browser, it connects to the rights management service via browser, and that allows you to view protected files that are stored in those repositories or upload a protected file to view. So we can support both scenarios.
Great, thanks, Bill. Our next question is for Guy over at Siemens. The question is, what versions of Teamcenter does EDRM work with?
So EDRM is available for all releases of Teamcenters 10 and 11, along with the supported versions of the Active Workspace web client on those two versions of Teamcenter. So that's Active Workspace 2.4 and above.
Great, thank you. So the next question is, you showed this being shared via the zero client interface. You mentioned that the protect works with any share method. What happens when a file is emailed, and how does this communicate back to the DRM?
Sure. So the protection is persistent. So when a file has been protected and it's shared, you're sharing the protected version of the file, the encrypted file. So the way that the data is shared, it doesn't really matter. So again, if it's, in this case, it was a file share, it could be email, it could be uploaded to cloud storage. So when a user receives that protected file, they have to be authorized to open up that file. So that's where either that rich client comes in or the web-based interface. So if I have a file that's been protected with EDRM for Teamcenter, I can't do anything with it until I use one of those two methods to attempt to open up the file, and that's when we check those policies. So we check to see if the user is authorized and if they have access to that data via policies. And if they're granted access, file opens up in either the rich client or the zero client web interface. And then we can communicate audit information back to our EDRM for Teamcenter for the audit purposes that I had mentioned previously. So you can choose to send audit information back so we can keep track of who's accessing that IP and who it's been shared with.
Great, thank you. Next question is, does EDRM use blockchain technology? I think that was for...
not currently.
Okay. Next question here. Can users still have access to the file they have received after they have moved to another team or department in the company?
So that's all based on policies. Guy had mentioned that we use the attribute-based access control paradigm. So what that means is when we when a user attempts to open up a file, we can look at, so we look at the classification of the data that they're accessing, and we also look at the attributes of the user who's accessing that data. So in our demonstration, the supplier had a couple different attributes available to us, that they were in the UK, so their country attribute, and that they worked for a specific supplier, in this case Bolts. So we can use a combination of that attribute information to check against policies, and so we can have different policies for users in different countries or users at different suppliers to make access control decisions. So in a case where the user moves from a different team or a different department or whatever attribute information we're keeping track of, in this case, maybe if they move from a different supplier, that access changes automatically. So you change that user's attribute, so maybe they move from the UK to the US or vice versa. When that attribute changes, the next time the user tries to access that data, so at runtime, we'll do another check against those user attributes and the data classification to determine what policies apply to that user now. So when that attribute changes, their access can also change automatically. So that ensures that whenever a user tries to access that data, we ensure that the latest policies and the latest user attributes are used to make those decisions if they can access that data.
Great. And then a follow-up is, can the user receive alerts when there's unauthorized access?
Sure. So within that audit, so the auditing and reporting piece, we can set up alerts. So if a user so you can set up alerts if someone is doing something that they're not supposed to be doing, so you can set up rules to send out alerts to users if there's unauthorized activity that you need to further investigate. So there is an alerting option set up.
Great. Next question is, does EDRM work with Teamcenter supplier
So Teamcenter supplier collaboration does support encrypted files with Data Share Manager. And we have plans on extending that support with Briefcase Browser and supporting encrypted files, protected files within the payload for Briefcase Browser.
Great. Got one more question so far. So, so a file's emailed to someone, but they have, do they have to know if they need to log into the Zero client, which communicates with the server? And if they can't log in, will they not be able to open up the file?
Sure. So they have to be able to log in because that's how we check to make sure that it's an authorized user and a user that we're actually sharing this data with. Because so in the scenario that we outlined, we don't want to share our important data, our IP, with unknown users. So this is how we have control throughout the supply chain as data is being shared. So the user needs to be able to authenticate and so that we can check their authorization to that specific file. So this ensures that we're only sharing our important data with known users. As for knowing which method to use to open up the file, it doesn't matter. Both methods are the same. So a user could open up a file on the desktop via the client, or they could use the Zero client, depending on what method they have access to or that they want to use. So both scenarios will be supported for all users, and that can be controlled via policy too. So there could be use cases where you only want to give users access via the secure browser, the secure viewer, and that's something that will get communicated to a user when data gets shared with them.
Great, thanks, Bill. To attendees, just as a reminder, you can use the Q&A box on the right to ask questions. And as Chris mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, a recording link will be sent out by email within about 2 days. So keep an eye out for that. If you have additional questions after the webinar, feel free to reach out to us over email. we'll try to get you the answer you're looking for. So looks like we've gone through all the questions. Actually, Bill, do you mind hitting the next slide there? Great. So as to close off the webinar, just want to make sure you guys are aware that there is a PLM white paper that NextLabs has put together and kindly shared with the attendees. A link to this will be included in that email with the recording replay link, but you can also use the bit.ly link seen on your screen right now to get a copy of that white paper. All right, well, thank you everyone for a great webinar, and as I mentioned, we'll follow up over email if you have any additional questions. Thanks to Guy, Bill, and Chris, and Keng, our speakers here. And hope you all have a wonderful morning, or if you're on the East Coast, good afternoon.